So we spoke about the way that the boxes look. They have to be completely square, right? The piece on the bottom, which is called a titura, is square. The box on top is, of course, smaller, but sits on top of it. It also has to be completely square. All the angles have to be right angles over there. They have to be completely black, except for the piece on the bottom, the piece that sits on the arm and on the head. So that's normally leather coloured. Now the Tefillin Shel Rosh has got a very interesting thing. On each side of it, I don't know if you ever paid attention, but on each side there's a shin. Mm-hmm. However, the shin on one side is different from the shin on the other side, right? The letter shin normally, here, the letter shin normally looks like that, right? Just a very regular looking standard shin. However, so on the right hand side you have the shin like that. On the left hand side you have a shin that looks like this with it's got 4 branches. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You ever paid attention to this?
No, I didn't notice that.
No. What shame on you. Next time you've got Tefillin Shel Rosh in your hand, just take a look and you'll see. It's an interesting thing. I tell you what's the problem. When you're not concentrating, the 4-branched shin, it looks okay. You don't really realize that it's not. You don't really realize that it's not a regular shin. So you don't think about it. Shin and shin. We'll talk about why the shin is there and what it refers to and everything in a moment. However, so what's going on? It's a very esoteric concept. This four branched shin is a very esoteric dimension. Where's it coming from? The Bach explains that the letters that were written onto the 10 Commandments, right? When you've got the 2 tablets of stone, and the letters, how were the letters written on? They were etched in. However, the etching was all the way through, which means that somebody help me out over here. I don't think etching is the right word for this actually, but
Engraved.
Engraved, does engraved go all the way through? I don't know. Is that, yeah? Whatever. For now, that's what it does, right? Engraving, it's engraved all the way through. It's cut all the way through, and what you're looking at is you're not looking at a letter made out of stone, but rather you're looking at the. You understand what I'm saying? You're looking at the stone has been cut away, and you've got the piece of stone, the tablet of stone, and then you've got all the letters have been cut through. Just as an aside. The sages explained that I don't know if you know anything about the Hebrew alphabet, but the mem, the final mem, and a samach, the samach is just a round circle with a piece in the middle, and the mem is a square with a piece in the middle. And the sages explain, Chazal explain that the samach, the middle part of the samach, the mem, it was there, even though it wasn't attached to anything, and it was suspended miraculously. It wasn't holding on to anything. It was just there. However, explains the Bach, what's the inyan of this four pronged shin? Because when you've cut something out, there are 2 ways of looking at it, right? You could look at this piece over here is a bit that's been cut away, and the rest, the white part, is the stone. Or you could look at it a different way, and you could say that each white piece over here is one of the prongs, right? And then you've got 1, 2, 3, and the pencil part over here is the part that's being left in place by the stone, right? So it explains the Bach that in order to have 3 embossed branches coming out of the shin, you need to have 4 arms, right? To have the gaps in between the 2. Yeah, in between the 3, I'm sorry. What is the function of all of this? I'll tell you the truth, I don't really know. It's somewhat Kabbalistic, that's for sure. It's very esoteric. Why it's important to have the shin that looks like this and a shin that looks like that. However, what is for sure is that wending its way through the tefillin are 3 letters that keep repeating themselves: a shin, a daled, and a yud. What do the shin and the daled and the yud spell out? They spell out one of the names of God. Now, which name of God? God has got several different names, and each one represents something completely different, one from the other. And the name of Shin Daled Yud of God is She'omar Le'olamo Dai. When God created the world, so he created the world, and he said to the world, when, at some point in the creation, he said to the world, enough. Now, at this point, I would ask you if anybody understands what the inference of that particular idea is, but I'm looking around the room and I'm not convinced that anybody is functioning well enough to be able to try to answer that. But let's give it a go, shall we? Yeah.
Does that imply free will?
Oh, how does it imply free will?
Because if God stopped creating, then it's up to us to continue.
Oh, very good. Great. Right, which is that if God could have finished up the whole process of the creation by himself, right? When he says die, he says enough. That means that there's something that still hasn't been done that's being left up to us to take care of. And that's the function of free will, that we have to utilize our free will to do what God wants us to do, and not to utilize our free will to do what we're not supposed to do, which is what most of us do, right? Oh, that got a pretty universal approval. Good. Okay. So what's the idea? The idea is like this, that the name of God of Shin Daled Yud is the dimension of God allowing us the ability within the physical world to fulfill the end of the creation, right? We have to do it within the physical. It's now up to us to take care of what needs to be done. Anybody else know what you know where else that Shin Daled Yud appears? The letters Shin Daled Yud. Interestingly enough, they appear on a mezuzah as well. If you take a look, a mezuzah case has got normally has a shin on the outside. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But inside, when the mezuzah has been written, it gets rolled up. And on the outside of the mezuzah are the letters Shin Daled Yud. And when you put your mezuzah into the case, regardless of whether it is a clear case or whether it's a case that you can't see the parchment inside, regardless of that, the Shin Daled Yud is supposed to be pointing out. So when a person walks through the door and they kiss a mezuzah, that's really the dimension that they're talking about. Again, what's this idea? The idea is very simple. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God gave us here in this physical world the ability to use the physicality and to turn it into a spiritual dimension, right? So when we go through the doorway is a pretty, doorway is a pretty physical thing. But we should know that within the doorway there's a mezuzah, which means that we define what our homes are going to look like, what our doorways are going to look like. Rav Hirsch says something very, very beautiful. He says that, Rav Hirsch says that you can't control what's going on out in the street. Right? You can't control the influences, you can't control the advertisements, you can't control the people that are walking around, what they're wearing. But in your home you can. You define what kind of flavor your home is going to have. And that's one of the reasons why the mezuzah is put on the doorpost. So that when you come into your home, you know that you're entering into your domain. You can define whether this domain is going to be a spiritual domain, whether it's not going to be a spiritual domain. That is dependent upon you. And that is the idea of the Shin Daled Yud. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying here, I'm stopping, and now it's up to you people to finish up the job. When you think about it for a moment, what's it got to do with tefillin? So when you think about it for a moment, tefillin are an incredibly non-spiritual, physical dimension, right? You take leather, which is coming from a dead animal. I mean, animals are very physical. Dead animals presumably are the spitz of physicality. They've got no spiritual dimension to them whatsoever. And yet, what do? You take the leather, you fashion it into tefillin. These tefillin are some kind of a communication system which allows us to connect together to God in a way that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And we take the leather straps, which again made out of this animal's skin, and we wrap them around us, and we put all of this on, and now we're able to be in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's realm, down here in the physical world. We now enter into HaKadosh Baruch Hu's realm, into God's realm, by putting on tefillin. And all of that is being done by what? It's being done by us utilizing the physicality and turning the physical into a spiritual experience. And that's why throughout the tefillin you're going to find this Shin Daled Yud. It repeats itself. It's up on the tefillin Shel Rosh. You've got a Shin Daled Yud. On the tefillin Shel Yad you've got a Shin Daled Yud. It's working its way through. Right. One of the things that you do when you when you put your tefillin on and you strap them on down at the bottom of your arm, one of the things you do is that you make a Shin and a Daled. Again, different ways of doing it, different methods. It doesn't matter which custom you're following. But the idea is have the Shin and a Daled, and the Yud is represented by the little knot up on the top next to the Tefillin. So you've got your Shin Daled Yud on your Tefillin Shel Yad, you've got your Shin on the Tefillin Shel Rosh, which are embossed onto the Tefillin themselves, and then you've got at the back the Daled, and you can make a Daled out of the little knot at the back, you can make a Yud out of the little knot at the back, which means that you've got this concept is revolving itself around this idea of it's up to us. It's up to us to take the physicality and to turn it into a spiritual dimension. I've mentioned this on many occasions, but that's something which I think is very beautiful. It really is. That by the Hasidim, they have a custom on Shabbos, when they eat the Shabbos meal, that before they begin each course, they say, L'chavod Shabbos Kodesh. That I'm eating this L'chavod Shabbat Kodesh, in order to honor Shabbos Kodesh, right? The sanctity of Shabbos. What's the idea? The idea is very simple. When we come to eat on Shabbos, we're trying to elevate that from being just a mundane process of eating food, and we're going to turn it into something a little bit more uplifted, a little bit more elevated than that. By the Hasidim, they've got this custom saying L'chavod Shabbos Kodesh. What they're doing is that they're just giving themselves a reminder that this piece of chicken that I'm eating right now, I'm eating it not just because it looks good and not just because I'm hungry, but because it's going to elevate my Shabbos experience. That really is the concept of Shin Daled Yud, that dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of utilizing the physical and making it more spiritual. At the base of the tefillin, there are stitches going around. Now again, I should have brought them along and had a look, right? But I forgot, you forgot, so here we go. We don't have tefillin over here, but going around at the bottom, we've got stitches. Stitches have to be completely square, right? How do you make stitches? You've got holes going along, we'll talk about how many, but you've got holes going along on each four sides, and they have to be completely in line with each other. If one of them is not in line, then the tefillin, there's a question about whether the tefillin are considered to be kosher or not. The thread that's used is a gid. It's a vein that's found in most animals. It needs to come from a kosher animal. And in most tefillin, you'll find that there are 12 holes, which means you've got 3 holes on each side. You've got 4 sides. 3 times 4 is how much?
12.
Wow, look at that. That the best way to take care of the sewing up is to use one long piece of sinew that's going to go all the way around. If it's not possible, then you can use different bits, but it's better to use one whole piece. The Tefillin Shel Rosh, again, because it's made up of 4 different pieces of parchment, so you need to have an identifiable compartment for each one. The Tefillin Shel Yad, the hand tefillin, everything is written on one piece of parchment, it's folded up and it's placed inside. Tefillin Shel Rosh, you've got 4 different bits of parchment, each one goes into its own little bit, which is why, if you ever paid attention to the way that your Tefillin Shel Rosh looks, you'll see that there are lines, 3 lines that go along the base, the box of the Tefillin Shel Rosh, from the bottom to the other side, which is making 4 different compartments, and they correspond on the inside. The 4 different compartments are absolutely separate one from the other, and again, these are very difficult things to make because we're trying to use one piece of leather over here, which means that you've got to use a very special method of being able to push the leather into the shape that you want it to be, and that each bit should be pretty much the same size as the other. Yeah.
Do you have to, is there a certain direction or orientation that the 4 compartments have to be?
Yeah, when you've got them on, they should all be running like that.
Okay.
right? And that's why you'll see in your tefillin that when you've got the tefillin on, the lines will always be going in this direction and not in that direction.
Okay.
Right? If you've got them going in that direction, it means you've got your tefillin on sideways. But I don't know how you could do it. But if you do, then that makes you a very talented guy. That's for sure. So the same way that the tefillin, the leather that's used for making the tefillin, has to have been set aside from the beginning of the process. It needs to have been set aside to be used for making tefillin. So too, the straps. The leather that's used in order to make the straps has to have been set aside from the very beginning. And like I said, they should be dyed black with the black facing outwards. Nowadays you can find tefillin straps that are both black on the inside and the outside. That just makes life a little bit easier, but it's not something which is absolutely an obligation to do. When they're being dyed, the straps and the button themselves, the houses that the tefillin are in, when they're being dyed, they need to be dyed l'shem mitzvahs tzitzis, l'shem mitzvahs tefillin, I'm sorry. If they weren't, which I'm not quite sure how a person's supposed to know this, but if it transpires, you find out that your tefillin straps were not dyed for the mitzvah of tefillin, or that the button themselves were not, the black color wasn't put on in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin, then they should be taken to somebody, and if needs be, they can be repainted, or the the straps can be taken out and put back in again in order to fulfill the idea of doing them in the name of the mitzvah. How wide should the straps be? They should be a minimum of 10 millimeters, which of course is not very much. However, you need to know people who are making tefillin, so they have to be very careful because the straps will come in set widths. You need to have the tefillin have to be able to sit inside. The strap has to sit inside the tefillin and hold it in place. You don't want straps that are thin to the point where you can move the tefillin box around, because everything's supposed to be sitting in exactly the right place, which means that when you buy a pair of tefillin, you should have them fitted so that the knot at the back of the head should be knotted in exactly the right place, and the front of the tefillin should be sitting right in the middle, so that when you put them on each morning, you don't have to try very hard to get them into place. You know that if you put your knot into the right place, then you should know that the middle of the tefillin is going to be sitting exactly where it needs to sit. If the straps are too thin, then it means that the whole box can be moved easily backwards and forwards, and that means that you're going to have a lot of trouble over there making sure that it stays in the position that it's supposed to stay in. You need to just be, certain things you need to be careful of, where the place where the knot on the tefillin shel yad is, and the knot on the tefillin shel rosh at the back. So you've still got to have 10 millimeters, that's the minimum. And sometimes when these things get stretched a little bit, maybe they'll be less than that. It's good to check it from time to time. What you may have noticed, or maybe you haven't, when you put your tefillin shel rosh on, that the right hand strap and the left hand strap are not the same length. So you put your tefillin shel rosh on, and you've got the right hand strap running down over here and the left hand strap running down over here, but one of them is longer than the other one. The right hand strap is longer than the left hand strap. That's the way that it's supposed to be. It's not a mistake, and it's not that somebody just wasn't careful enough when they were making your tefillin. Quite the opposite. If you've got them both exactly the same length, then it means that something's not right somewhere, and you need to do something about it. Why is that? There's an interesting machloikas over here about exactly where they need to drop down to, but one idea is that the left-hand strap has to reach at least to your left hand, to your chest, which is where your heart is. The right hand one has to reach at least down until your belly button, which is considered to be the center of the body. There's another opinion, which is that the left hand strap should come down to your belly button, and the right hand strap should come down to at least the place of your bris milah, your place of circumcision. Again, each one is representing a different dimension, a different concept over here. But the most important thing over here is that one should be longer than the other, and that the black should always be facing outwards. I don't know if you've ever seen the way that tefillin are being made. But once the tefillin are ready, once the bayit is ready, the parchment has to be put into the tefillin. And what happens is that the correct way of doing it is that they take a hair from a calf and they tie the parchment up that it shouldn't start unraveling, and then it gets pushed, and then it gets covered with a blank piece of parchment, which means that you've got your parchment with the writing on it being covered by another piece of blank parchment, and that's tied up again, which means the first bit of parchment is tied up with a piece of hair. It's then put into a little piece of parchment that's going to act as some kind of a pocket. That's covered. That's then tied up with another piece of hair, and then it gets put into the bayit and it gets sewn up. The last halacha with regards to Hilchos Tefillin is that if a person wears their tefillin regularly, then you can work on the premise that your tefillin are kosher. You don't have to go and get them checked, even though there is a concept inside of the halacha that you should have your tefillin checked once every 3.5 years. There's even a concept you should have your tefillin and your mezuzahs checked every Elul. Right, as we come around to the beginning to work our ways up to Rosh Hashanah and the 10 days of repentance, it's considered to be a very opportune moment to have your tefillin checked to make sure that they're kosher. The way that you check your tefillin, I guess you're supposed to check yourself as well to make sure that you're kosher as well. However, if you wear your tefillin on a continual basis, then you don't have to be overly concerned and you can work on the premise that they're kosher. And if not, then they need to be checked. Some people have a spare pair of tefillin. If you've got a spare pair of tefillin, they need to be given in once every 3.5 years at least in order to make sure that they're doing okay. I'll give you just an interesting little thing. When I was bar mitzvahed, so I got given my grandfather's tefillin. My grandfather had passed away a couple of years before. My brother had had a bar mitzvah before me, but my brother's bar mitzvah was immediately after my mother got up from sitting shiva for my grandfather. Nothing had been sorted out. When it got to my bar mitzvah, I got given my grandfather's tefillin. They were very special for me. It was a very special feeling to know that I was wearing my grandfather's tefillin, and I wore them until I got to yeshiva. When I came to yeshiva here in Israel, so one day they put up a sign that the next morning there was going to be a group of scribes and tefillin experts were going to be in the yeshiva, and after davening you could drop your tefillin off, and they would go through them, make sure, they would check them all, and then they would give them back, and you'd get them back by the end of the day. So I'd never had them checked, so I thought it was not a bad idea. So I gave them in, and it transpired that everything was not okay. There was nothing that was okay. There was problems with the parchments. There was problem with the straps. There was problem with the box of the tefillin themselves. Like you name it. I was devastated. This was it was really, really upsetting. And I phoned up my uncle who lives over here, and I said to him, "What do I do?" So he said that he told me, I never knew any of this. Of course, I was just before my bar mitzvah, I wasn't aware of what was going on. But he said that he'd always wanted to have my grandfather's tefillin. They were his father's tefillin. He'd always wanted them, and he would make a deal with me that he would buy me a proper kosher pair of tefillin if I would give him my grandfather's tefillin, because he wanted to keep them as a keepsake. I don't know if he ever got them fixed up or if he just wanted to have them because they were the tefillin that my grandfather used. I don't know. So that's when I got a different pair of tefillin instead. Is it a good idea to get your tefillin checked? I think so. As a person begins a path into perhaps a more orthodox lifestyle, if you've got tefillin that you haven't paid very much attention to over the years, it's probably a good idea to get them checked. In Mitzvah Hashem you'll find out that they're absolutely fine, but it is conceivable that I don't think that people who come from not very orthodox backgrounds, if they buy tefillin for their sons when they get married, so when they become bar mitzvah, when they buy them tefillin, I don't think that they invest a lot of time and money in buying them. It's just something that needs to get done. It's part of the preparations. If that's the case, you may be lucky and your tefillin may be absolutely wonderful. They may be fine. And if not, it's certainly worth finding out. Why is that? Because if your tefillin are not okay, then it means that every morning you're putting on tefillin and you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. Which means for years I was putting on tefillin and not fulfilling the mitzvah of putting on tefillin because I never knew that the tefillin themselves were not kosher. Good. On that uplifting and inspiring note, I think we're going to stop because we've got to the end of Hilchos Tefillin. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you go over the symbolic meaning behind wearing tefillin again?
Yeah, sure. There's all kinds of, again, esoteric dimensions. But one of the things over here is something I mentioned at the beginning of all this. That somebody called Rabbi Bachai writes in the Kada Kemach, very early rabbi. He writes something very beautiful. He says that you have 5 different senses: the sense of touch, the sense of hearing, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, and the sense of sight. And he says that the tefillin are broken up into 5 different compartments. There's the tefillin shel yad, which is one piece, and the tefillin shel rosh, which has got 4 different pieces inside of it, 4 different compartments. And he says that 4 of your senses are centered around your head, and 1 sense is centered around your arm. And he says that tefillin shel yad only has 1 compartment inside of it. The tefillin shel rosh has got 4, and they symbolize these 5 different senses. And the idea of your senses, that's really who you are. And when you take your tefillin, what are you doing? You're tying those 4 senses, literally, you're tying them up and you're offering them back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So really a very, very beautiful idea. And one last idea, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I think, actually, the truth, I think it's mind-blowing, actually. That your tefillin shel rosh sit up here, right, on the top of your head like this, just above your hairline. Which is the place that babies that are born, their skulls are open. There's a place over here that the skull is open, and slowly but surely over the space of about a year, the skull closes, right, until it closes up entirely. I mentioned if you ever get to see a little baby, you can see the brain pulsing. It's like an experience. It really is. The Arizal. So we're talking about something very Kabbalistic right now, but the Arizal says that we place our tefillin shel rosh exactly on that spot which was once open. So the Arizal says when we put on our tefillin shel rosh, we're opening up that place again. We're opening up a communication to God that we wouldn't be able to have if we weren't wearing them. Which means that the dimensions of tefillin, do we understand them? We don't understand them properly. In a certain dimension, tefillin are a chok, they're a statute. But nevertheless, the potential of tefillin is something absolutely extraordinary. Any other questions?
So why is it then that it's an obligation only for men to wear tefillin?
But women are exempt from all time-bound positive mitzvahs. There's an interesting discussion whether women can they wear tefillin, can't they wear tefillin? There's definitely records in history of women that have worn tefillin. Michal, the daughter of King Saul, used to wear tefillin. That's what the Gemara says. According to some opinions, the daughters of Rashi also wore tefillin, but there's no obligation to do so. Okay, I think we're going to call it a day over here in Mitzvah Hashem. And on Sunday we have to start something new. I'm not sure what we're going to start. I have to speak to Rabbi Geffen and we'll find out what we're going to learn on Sunday.